Black waitress's daughter begs the billionaire CEO for a job to earn money to save her sick mother. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into the story. This is a story of hope, perseverance, and unexpected turns. You won't believe what happens next. It all began on a rainy Wednesday evening in downtown San Francisco at the bustling and luxurious rooftop restaurant called The Summit. The atmosphere was rich with the hum of conversations and the clinking of wine glasses, but the storm outside seemed to mirror the internal struggles of one waitress, who was standing at the back of the room. Her name was Cassandra, a single mother working tirelessly to provide for her young daughter, Amara. The soft light from the chandeliers made her tired eyes shimmer as she silently cleaned up the tables, pretending not to notice the wealthy patrons around her, all dressed in tailored suits and fine gowns. She had become invisible in this world of affluence, and she was okay with that. At least, she thought she was. But that evening, something was different. Her daughter, Amara, was at home alone, battling the flu. It wasn't just any flu. This time, it had drained all of her energy, leaving her struggling to breathe. Cassandra could hear the doctor's warning echoing in her mind. Without proper medication and care, her daughter's condition could worsen. The bills were mounting, and Cassandra could barely afford to keep up with rent, let alone pay for her daughter's medical needs. She had already taken on extra shifts at the summit, hoping for a miracle that might allow her to pay for the treatment Amara desperately needed. But miracles were rare. Her only hope now was the wealthy CEO who had just walked into the restaurant. His name was Richard Kessler, a powerful businessman, known for his cutting-edge innovations in the tech world. He was the man every entrepreneur aspired to be, the man who had everything, except empathy. As he sat down at a table by the window, his eyes briefly scanned the room, dismissing everyone around him with the same cold, calculating gaze that had helped him climb to the top. The air shifted when he ordered a bottle of wine with an air of superiority, his voice sharp and commanding. Cassandra, despite her exhaustion, knew this was her chance. She had been serving him and his colleagues for months now, but tonight, there was a desperation in her heart that made her approach him. With a steady breath, she walked over, holding the bottle of wine in one hand and the glasses in the other, trying to steady her nerves. "Good evening, sir. I hope the evening is going well for you," she said, placing the glasses in front of him. Richard glanced up from his phone, barely acknowledging her presence. "Just pour the wine," he muttered, clearly uninterested in pleasantries. As she poured the wine into his glass, her heart raced. She could feel the weight of her daughter's condition hanging over her. But it was now or never. "Sir," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this may sound strange, but I need your help. My daughter is very sick, and I've done everything I can, but I'm out of options. Please, can you give me a chance? A job, anything, to help me pay for her treatment?" Richard looked at her, then glanced around the room as if searching for someone to make this awkward moment end. His lips curled into a smug smile. "What do you expect me to do about it?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm just a waitress," Cassandra said, her voice trembling now. But she stood tall, refusing to let him see how much it hurt. "I'll work extra shifts, clean your office, do whatever it takes." Richard scoffed, his laughter echoing through the room. "You expect me to hire you just because your daughter is sick? That's not how the world works." He turned his attention back to his phone, dismissing her completely. But Cassandra didn't leave. She stayed rooted in her spot, her hand gripping the wine bottle tighter. "You don't understand. This isn't just for me. It's for her," she said softly. "She's everything I have left. I just need a chance." The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound being the faint hum of the city outside and the sound of Cassandra's heart pounding in her chest. Richard, still staring at his phone, finally spoke. "Fine. I'll give you one chance," he said, almost as if he was bored by the whole thing. "But you better prove your worth." Cassandra blinked in disbelief, her hands shaking as she placed the wine bottle back on the table. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible as she turned to walk away, a weight lifting from her shoulders. But as she walked to the back of the restaurant, her thoughts were already focused on her daughter and the one chance she had to save her. The next few days were a whirlwind for Cassandra. She barely had time to breathe, let alone process what had happened the night she'd made that desperate plea to Richard Kessler. The promise he'd made seemed too good to be true, and yet, there it was, her opportunity, her only hope to get the money she needed for Amara's treatment. She spent the next day in a haze, working her usual shifts at the summit, the weight of her daughter's condition never far from her mind. She kept telling herself that she had to make this work, that this one chance might be the lifeline they needed. It was almost closing time when she got a text message from Richard. "Meet me in my office tomorrow morning. Let's see if you're worth the chance." It wasn't a warm message, but it was a start. The next morning, Cassandra arrived at the summit early, feeling both anxious and determined. As she walked through the back door, the restaurant was quiet, still in preparation for the evening rush. She headed straight for the elevator, her heart pounding. As she stepped into Richard's private office, the doors closed behind her with a soft chime. Richard was already sitting behind a sleek glass desk, his back to the window that overlooked the city. His cold demeanor hadn't changed. "Sit," he said curtly, without looking up. Cassandra took a seat across from him, her hands clenched in her lap. "I don't know what you want from me, but let's get this over with." His tone was indifferent, but there was something else beneath it, something almost like curiosity. Cassandra didn't speak right away. She knew this was a test, but she wasn't sure what kind of test. Was he testing her skills, her resolve, or something else entirely? "You wanted a job. You have a job. Let's see what you can do." He slid a folder across the table toward her. It was filled with complex documents, a series of business plans and strategies that Cassandra had never seen before. She stared at them for a moment, unsure of what she was looking at. "I don't have the qualifications for this," she said, the doubt creeping into her voice. "I didn't ask for your qualifications," Richard replied flatly. "I asked if you could do the job. Figure it out." With that, he turned back to his work, leaving Cassandra to sift through the papers. Her mind raced. This was more than just a typical office job. This was a high-stakes business challenge, something far beyond her current understanding. But she wasn't about to back down. She needed this job. She needed this opportunity for Amara. And she had to prove to Richard, and to herself, that she was capable. For the next several hours, Cassandra pored over the documents, doing her best to understand the strategies and data. Her fingers trembled as she made notes, her mind working in overdrive. She wasn't a businesswoman, but she had spent years serving people, learning about how they think, how they make decisions. In a way, she had been training for this moment all her life. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she had an idea. She approached Richard's desk, holding the folder in her hands. "I think I have a solution," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. Richard glanced up, his expression unreadable. He didn't say anything, but he motioned for her to continue. Cassandra laid out her ideas, explaining how she believed the company could expand into new markets by utilizing existing resources more efficiently. She pointed to specific figures, explaining her rationale and her plan. Richard listened intently, his eyes narrowing as he followed her every word. When she finished, there was a long pause. The silence between them was almost unbearable. Finally, Richard spoke. "Not bad," he said, his voice still cold, but there was something else in his tone, a flicker of respect, perhaps. "You may have just earned yourself a place here." Cassandra couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had done it. She had earned the chance. She so desperately needed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She had a job, and with that job, she could finally begin to save her daughter. As she left Richard's office that day, Cassandra felt a strange sense of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She had crossed a line, from being just another waitress in the background to someone who could stand tall in a world that had never given her a chance. But the road ahead was still uncertain. She wasn't sure what her future at the company would look like, but she was determined to make it work. For Amara. For herself. She had already made it this far, and she wasn't going to stop now. The following weeks flew by in a blur of early mornings and late nights as Cassandra worked harder than ever at the summit. She had her foot in the door now, but she knew that every single day at work was a test. She spent every free moment at home studying the business strategies that Richard had given her, reviewing data, learning how to calculate profit margins, and understanding market trends. It wasn't easy. She had never been a businesswoman, but her desire to save Amara kept her going. Her daughter's health continued to decline, and Cassandra could no longer afford to ignore the mounting hospital bills. There were days when she didn't know how much longer she could hold on. But then she thought of Amara, curled up in bed, fighting the fever that never seemed to go away. Amara was her everything. And now, thanks to Richard's offer, Cassandra was one step closer to giving her daughter the future she deserved. But it wasn't going to be easy. Cassandra arrived at the summit one morning, determined to make the most of this new opportunity. Richard had kept his word and offered her a temporary position in the marketing department. It was small, but it was something. She was to report directly to him for a project he had in mind, one that could potentially bring in millions for the company. As she walked into the office, she was met with the same cold reception she had grown accustomed to. Richard didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're here to work, not to chat. Let's see what you can do," he said as he handed her a stack of papers. "I've been reviewing some of your ideas, and I'm not convinced you understand the scope of this project. This is big money, not a hobby. You'll have to step up your game." Cassandra's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She had been underestimated her entire life. This wasn't the first time someone had looked down on her. She took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and dove into the task. For hours, she worked through the paperwork, made notes, and formulated a plan. She couldn't afford to fail, not now. She had learned from the best without even realizing it. Her time serving customers had taught her how to read people, understand their needs, and anticipate their reactions. These skills, once used for simple customer service, were now her greatest assets in the business world. As she completed her presentation, she felt a surge of confidence she had never known before. She had done it. She had created a marketing plan that was not only feasible but bold enough to stand out in the competitive tech industry. With her heart racing, she stood in front of Richard's office door, knocking softly. When he motioned her in, she stepped forward, holding the binder that contained her proposal. "Here's my plan," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside. Richard glanced up from his desk, his face unreadable. He took the binder from her and skimmed through the pages, not speaking a word. The silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, he closed the binder, his gaze still fixed on her. "This is actually good," he said, a faint surprise in his voice. "You've put thought into this. I'll admit, I wasn't expecting much, but you've exceeded my expectations." Cassandra's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected a compliment, let alone approval. "Thank you," she said, trying to hide the relief in her voice. Richard leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. "We'll move forward with your plan, but don't get comfortable. This is just the beginning. You're in, but you've got to keep proving yourself. If you slack off, I'll be the first one to drop you." Cassandra nodded, keeping her emotions in check. She had earned this chance, and now she wasn't going to waste it. But Richard's approval was only the beginning. The real test lay ahead. Back at home, the weight of her responsibilities felt even heavier. Amara was worse than ever, and Cassandra had to make sure she didn't fall behind at work while still caring for her daughter. The next few days were a blur of meetings, emails, and calculations, but Cassandra kept her focus. She knew that one misstep could cost her everything, but she was determined. And then came the breakthrough. One of the investors in the company, a high-profile venture capitalist, was impressed by Cassandra's marketing proposal. Richard called her into his office with news that would change everything. "We're moving forward with your plan. But there's one more thing. I want you to pitch it to the board in 2 weeks, he said, his tone unexpectedly respectful. Cassandra was stunned. The board? She had never been in front of a boardroom full of investors before. "You think I can do it?" she asked, barely able to hold back her nerves. Richard gave her a small smile. "You've earned your place here. Just don't screw it up." For the first time since she had started this job, Cassandra felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. She was doing it. She was climbing higher, and with every step, she felt closer to the life she wanted for Amara. But the journey wasn't over yet. She had to prove that she belonged in that room, with the CEOs and investors, or everything would fall apart. She had one chance, and she would make it count. The days leading up to the board meeting felt like an unrelenting storm for Cassandra. She had never imagined herself in a position like this, standing on the precipice of something so much bigger than herself. The weight of the responsibility was almost unbearable. She couldn't stop thinking about Amara, her sick daughter, lying in bed, her condition worsening by the day. Cassandra had promised herself she would succeed, but this was more than just business now. It was about providing a future for Amara, about making sure she never had to experience the pain of watching her mother struggle again. As the days passed, Cassandra threw herself into her work even more. The board meeting was in 2 days, and the pressure was mounting. Richard had given her the opportunity, but he made it clear that this wasn't just a favor. She had to prove herself, and she wasn't about to let him down. Late one night, as Cassandra worked through a particularly complex section of her presentation, she heard her phone vibrate across the desk. She had almost forgotten it was there, so absorbed in her task. She picked it up, her heart sinking when she saw the screen. It was a message from the hospital. "We need to discuss Amara's treatment options. Please call us as soon as you can." Cassandra's hands shook as she read the message, and for the first time in days, her focus wavered. Amara's treatment. The bills. The reality of it all crashed over her in that moment. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This was why she was doing all of this. She had to succeed, no matter the cost. With renewed determination, Cassandra dialed the hospital's number, her mind already racing with questions. The call was brief, but the information was clear. Amara's condition was more serious than they had originally thought. They needed to start more aggressive treatments, and that meant more money, more resources. Cassandra's stomach twisted at the thought. She couldn't lose her daughter, not when she was so close to turning their lives around. After the call ended, Cassandra sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had to get through this meeting. She had to prove that she was worthy of the opportunity Richard had given her. But she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The next day, Cassandra barely slept. She spent the entire night rehearsing her presentation, tweaking every detail, ensuring that everything was perfect. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. As she stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting her blouse and brushing her hair into place, she couldn't help but feel a wave of self-doubt. She wasn't from this world. She didn't belong in this boardroom full of high-powered executives. She was just a waitress, a mother, a woman trying to survive. But today, she had a chance to prove that she was so much more. When she walked into the boardroom that afternoon, her hands were clammy, but her posture was straight, and her heart pounded with fierce determination. The room was filled with the usual suspects, men in expensive suits, women with tight smiles, all looking at her as if they were waiting for her to fail. She couldn't let them see her fear. She couldn't let them see how much she had to lose. Richard sat at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on her. "Go ahead," he said with a flick of his hand, a gesture that told her this was her moment. Cassandra cleared her throat and began. She spoke clearly and confidently, using every bit of knowledge she had gained over the past few weeks. She laid out her marketing strategy, her plan to expand the company into new markets, and the steps they could take to increase their reach and revenue. She used numbers, facts, and figures, but she also spoke from the heart. This was her chance to show them that she wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman who could think strategically, who could bring value to the table in ways they hadn't anticipated. As she spoke, she could feel the eyes of the room on her, but instead of shrinking, she rose to the challenge. She pushed through her nerves, remembering what she had learned, remembering why she was here. As she finished her presentation, the room fell silent. Cassandra stood there, waiting for the inevitable critique, the inevitable dismissal. But then Richard spoke. "I have to admit, I didn't expect this," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You've impressed me. This is solid work. We're moving forward with your plan." Cassandra's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had done it. She had actually done it. Richard turned to the board members, his voice commanding as he added, "We're putting this into action. Cassandra, you'll be leading the project. You've earned it." The room buzzed with murmurs, but all Cassandra could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. She had earned it. The door to her future had just opened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, hope surged through her veins. But as she walked out of the boardroom, her mind quickly shifted back to Amara. The job was a huge step forward, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. She still had to fight for her daughter's life. She still had to win this battle. But now, for the first time, she felt like she had the power to do it. It was a week later, and Cassandra's life was beginning to shift in ways she had never thought possible. After Richard's approval of her proposal, she was given more responsibility than she had ever imagined. She had moved from being a waitress struggling to make ends meet to leading a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. The team she was now a part of was high-level, and her ideas were beginning to take shape. Yet, amidst all the excitement, Cassandra's mind never strayed too far from Amara. Each day that passed, her daughter's condition seemed to worsen, and no amount of work could silence the deep fear in her heart. The reality of the situation hit her every time she left the office, every time she walked through the door of her small apartment. She had no way of affording Amara's medical treatment on her own, and she couldn't let her daughter suffer. Cassandra had only one option left. She had to ask Richard for help. It wasn't something she wanted to do, but her pride didn't matter anymore. The night before the meeting, Cassandra lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of her daughter. She had to make the decision. The next morning, she stood in front of Richard's office door again, just like before, but this time she wasn't coming to talk about business. This time, it was personal. When Richard saw her enter, he didn't greet her the usual way. Instead, he paused and studied her face. "What's on your mind, Cassandra?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. It was almost as if he could sense the weight she was carrying. "I need your help," she said quietly, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's my daughter, Amara. She's sick, and I can't afford the treatment. I've tried everything, but I'm running out of options. I need to know if you can help me. I'm asking because I don't know what else to do." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at her, as if weighing the situation. Cassandra held her breath, unsure of what he was thinking. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "I didn't expect this," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But I know what it's like to have someone you care about in need." He paused for a moment, as if considering his next words carefully. "I'll help you, Cassandra. I'll cover the medical expenses for your daughter's treatment. You've earned that much." Cassandra's breath caught in her throat, and for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of relief. It wasn't just the money. It was the validation, the assurance that she wasn't alone in this fight. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. "You don't know how much this means to me." Richard gave her a nod. "It's the least I can do for someone who's proven themselves. You've shown more than just business savvy. You've shown heart. That matters more than anything." As Cassandra left Richard's office, she felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She still had a long road ahead, but now she had the resources she needed to fight for her daughter's health. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and work. Amara's condition improved slowly but steadily, thanks to the treatments that were now possible. Cassandra was still working hard on her marketing plan, but she felt more balanced now, her personal life no longer a constant source of anxiety. At the office, Richard continued to support her, trusting her with more important decisions. It felt like she was finally carving out a place for herself in this high-powered world, a place she had always thought was beyond her reach. But the real breakthrough came when the company's marketing campaign, which Cassandra had worked on tirelessly, became a massive success. Sales skyrocketed, and Richard praised her publicly in front of the entire team. "Cassandra has proven that determination and passion can lead to incredible results," he said with pride. "She's not just part of the team, she's a leader." It was a turning point for Cassandra. She had gone from struggling to survive to being recognized for her talents and hard work. She still had moments of doubt, still worried about Amara's future, but she knew now that she could handle whatever came her way. That night, as she sat in her small apartment, watching Amara sleep peacefully on the couch, Cassandra realized that this was just the beginning. The future she had dreamed of for so long was finally within her grasp. With Richard's help, she had not only secured a job but had changed the course of her life. But most importantly, she had proven to herself that no matter where she came from, she had the strength to rise above and make her dreams come true. The days following Cassandra's breakthrough at the office were a whirlwind of activity, and while her professional life was flourishing, her personal life seemed to be balancing out too. Amara was getting better with the new treatments, and Cassandra felt a sense of relief she hadn't known in months. Still, the pressures of her new role weighed on her, and the constant drive to prove herself never let up. She woke up each morning at 5, preparing for her day at the office, always thinking about the next steps, the next goal. But there was one thing she couldn't ignore: Richard. Ever since she had asked for his help with Amara's medical bills, Richard had become someone Cassandra respected, but also someone she didn't fully understand. The man who had once been so cold, almost indifferent, was now showing a side of himself she had not expected. It wasn't just about the work anymore. They had shared a moment of connection when he agreed to help her with Amara, and though Cassandra was grateful, she was also unsure of what it meant for their future. Was this kindness out of obligation, or was there something more? One evening, after another long day at the office, Cassandra received an unexpected invitation. Richard had asked her to meet him for dinner. It was unusual, given their strictly professional relationship, but Cassandra was used to surprises now. She agreed, curious to know what he wanted. When they met at a quiet restaurant in downtown San Francisco, Cassandra was greeted by Richard's usual reserved demeanor. He wasn't his usual cold self, but he wasn't exactly warm either. Still, Cassandra felt the tension between them. As they sat down to eat, Richard spoke first, his voice steady but not as commanding as usual. "I wanted to talk about your progress," he said, his gaze fixed on the menu. "You've exceeded my expectations, Cassandra. Not just with the campaign, but with how you've handled everything. Your daughter, your job, all of it." Cassandra nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had worked so hard to get to this point, but she hadn't expected to hear such praise from him. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "It hasn't been easy, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure Amara gets better." Richard's eyes softened for a moment, and Cassandra noticed the slight shift in his expression. "You're doing more than enough," he replied. "And I think you should know, that's what sets you apart from others here. Not just your business acumen, but your heart. You're not just a worker. You're someone who cares, and that's rare." Cassandra felt a wave of emotion surge through her, but she quickly kept it in check. It was hard to accept compliments, especially from someone who had once dismissed her as just a waitress. "I've learned that you have to care if you want to make a difference," she said quietly. "I didn't get this far by just doing what was expected of me. I've had to fight for every inch, for myself and for Amara." Richard leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. "I can see that," he said, "and it's not lost on me. You've made me rethink a lot of things. I've spent so much time focused on the bottom line, on results, but I've forgotten that people matter too. You've reminded me of that." The words hung in the air between them, and Cassandra found herself at a loss for words. She had never expected to hear such sincerity from Richard. It wasn't just about business anymore. There was something deeper, something real in his words. As the dinner progressed, they spoke more about business, but Cassandra couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. Richard wasn't just her boss now. There was a connection between them, one that wasn't entirely professional. And as the evening came to a close, Richard surprised her once again. "Cassandra," he said as they stood up to leave, "I've been thinking. You've earned more than just a promotion or a raise. I want to offer you something more, a partnership." Cassandra blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. "A partnership?" she asked. Richard nodded. "Yes, I want you to be part of the leadership team. You've proven you have what it takes. This company needs more people like you. People who think with their heart as well as their mind. I'm offering you a chance to help shape this company's future." Cassandra's mind raced as she processed his words. A partnership? It was everything she had dreamed of and more, but it also meant she would have to make a decision. Would she take this leap, knowing the responsibility it would bring, or would she stay in the role she had fought so hard to achieve? "I'll need some time to think about it," she said, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. Richard smiled slightly. "Take all the time you need, but know that this is a real opportunity. You've earned it." As they walked out of the restaurant together, Cassandra couldn't help but feel like she was standing at the edge of something life-changing. This wasn't just about her career anymore. This was about her future, about her daughter, and about the path she was forging for herself in a world she had once thought was beyond her reach. It had been a few weeks since Richard had offered Cassandra the partnership, and she still hadn't fully processed the magnitude of what he had said. Every day at work, she pushed herself harder, balancing her responsibilities as a leader in the company and as a mother to Amara, who was now on the road to recovery. Cassandra was grateful for the chance Richard had given her, but as the days went by, she started to feel the weight of the decision she had to make. The partnership offer lingered in the back of her mind, but she couldn't shake the fear of what it meant. It wasn't just about the money or the position. It was about the responsibility. Could she really handle this new role, given everything that was at stake? But one evening, as she sat at home, watching Amara play with her toys, Cassandra realized something that changed everything. Her daughter was growing stronger every day, and the world around them was beginning to feel a little less daunting. The fear she had been carrying for so long was slowly being replaced by something else: hope. She wasn't doing this just for herself anymore. She was doing it for Amara, for the future she had always dreamed of. The next morning, Cassandra walked into the office with a sense of purpose she hadn't had before. She knew what she had to do. She had to take that leap. When she walked into Richard's office, she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. Richard was already there, as usual, looking as composed as ever. "You wanted to talk?" he asked, his tone neutral. Cassandra took a deep breath, her hands steady as she spoke. "I've thought about your offer, Richard, and I've made my decision. I'm ready to take the next step." Richard looked at her with a raised eyebrow, clearly surprised. "You sure? This isn't a small commitment. You've already proven yourself, but this will change everything." Cassandra nodded. "I know, but I'm ready. I've been given so many chances already. This is the one that will change my life and Amara's. I can't let it slip by." Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes assessing her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you also have a lot to prove. Are you ready for the pressure that comes with this?" "I'm ready," Cassandra said, her voice unwavering. "I've been working for this moment for so long. I can handle the pressure. I have to." Richard stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, finally, he smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened his usual stern expression. "All right then," he said. "Welcome to the leadership team, Cassandra. I'm glad you're with us." The weight that had been pressing down on Cassandra for weeks lifted in an instant. It was official now. She had made the leap, and she was ready to prove herself. As she left Richard's office, her heart soared with a newfound sense of purpose. But there was no time to waste. She had to hit the ground running, and the next chapter of her life was waiting. Back at home, Amara was playing in the living room when Cassandra walked through the door. Her daughter looked up, her face lighting up as she ran toward her. "Mommy!" Amara exclaimed, her small hands reaching up for a hug. Cassandra scooped her up in her arms, holding her tight. "I did it, baby," Cassandra whispered, kissing Amara's forehead. "I got the job. We're going to be okay." Amara smiled, her eyes full of trust and love. "I knew you would, Mommy. You're the best." In that moment, Cassandra realized that everything she had worked for, every sacrifice, had led to this. She wasn't just doing this for herself anymore. She was doing it for Amara, for their future, for the life they both deserved. And now, with the opportunity she had been given, she was going to make sure that future was everything they had dreamed of. As she looked at Amara, her heart filled with gratitude and hope. She had been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Cassandra was ready. She had proven to herself that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. And with Richard's support and her determination, there was no limit to what she could achieve. For the first time in a long while, Cassandra felt like she was in control of her own destiny. As the weeks passed, Cassandra found herself settling into her new role with an unexpected sense of confidence. The transition from being a waitress to a key player in the marketing department had been daunting at first, but she quickly realized that she was more than capable of handling the responsibilities. She worked long hours, often staying late to ensure that every detail of her projects was perfect. But the effort paid off. The marketing campaign she had developed alongside her team was a massive success, far exceeding the company's expectations. Richard, once a figure of intimidating authority, now seemed to respect her not just as a colleague but as a partner. They had regular meetings to discuss the direction of the company, and Cassandra's input was valued in ways she had never imagined possible. She wasn't just working for Richard anymore. She was helping to shape the future of the company. It was a gratifying feeling, one that made all the sleepless nights and sacrifices worthwhile. But amidst her growing success, Cassandra never forgot the reason she had come this far: Amara. Her daughter's health had improved significantly, thanks to the treatments Richard had helped secure. Yet, the fear of what could still go wrong lingered. Cassandra's mind never strayed too far from the hospital bills, from the constant reminder that her life had always been defined by struggle. But now, It felt like the pieces were falling into place. One evening, as Cassandra sat at home after another long day at the office, Amara crawled into her lap, her face a picture of pure innocence. Cassandra looked down at her daughter, her heart swelling with love. "Mommy, I'm happy," Amara said, her voice soft but full of sincerity. Cassandra smiled, brushing a lock of hair from Amara's face. "I'm happy too. Baby," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be okay." In that moment, Cassandra realized how far they had come. She had fought so hard to get to this point, and now, for the first time, she could truly see the possibility of a future without fear. But the next step in her journey wasn't just about securing her own success. It was about lifting others up with her, about creating a world where people like her, people who had fought against the odds, could thrive. As the days went on, Cassandra began to take more initiative at work, not just in her own projects but in mentoring others. She worked with the new hires, sharing the lessons she had learned along the way. It wasn't easy, but she knew it was important. She wasn't just climbing a ladder for herself anymore. She was creating a path for others to follow. One afternoon, Richard called her into his office, his expression as serious as ever. "Cassandra, you've proven yourself to be more than just a good employee," he began, looking at her with an intensity she had come to recognize. "I've been thinking about the future of this company, and I believe you're the person who can lead it into the next phase." Cassandra felt a rush of excitement, but she remained composed. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady. "I want to offer you a higher position," Richard said, leaning forward slightly. "You've earned it, and I believe you're the right person to lead a new division we're launching. It'll be a challenge, but I know you can handle it." For a moment, Cassandra was speechless. This was everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of. It wasn't just a job, it was a chance to make a real impact. "I'm honored, Richard," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I have to ask, why me?" Richard smiled, the rare warmth in his eyes making him seem almost human. "Because you're the kind of person who doesn't give up. You've got vision, determination, and, most importantly, heart. That's why I know you're the right person for the job." As Cassandra left his office, her heart soared. She had done it. She had come from nothing, and now, she was leading the charge into a new future. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. She had proven her worth, but now it was time to prove that she could be the leader everyone believed she could be. The pressure was on, but for the first time, Cassandra felt like she was ready to take on the world. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Amara, for the future they had always dreamed of. And this time, she knew that nothing would stand in her way. As Cassandra stepped into her new role, the weight of responsibility felt different than she had expected. It was no longer just about surviving or proving herself. It was about shaping the future, both for the company and for herself. Her first few weeks in the new position were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and long nights working on new projects. But there was a noticeable shift in the air. Richard, once her boss, now seemed like a trusted ally, someone who recognized her abilities and respected her drive. Yet, Cassandra knew that her journey wasn't just about business anymore. She had already come so far, from a waitress struggling to get by to a woman leading a division within one of the most successful companies in the industry. But the real victory, the one that made everything worthwhile, was seeing Amara healthy again. Her daughter had grown stronger, her smile brightening Cassandra's days in ways she had never imagined. Every time she saw Amara laugh, every time she watched her daughter play without pain or fear, Cassandra felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. That was why she had fought so hard, to give Amara a better life. One evening, after another long day at the office, Cassandra returned home to find Amara waiting for her by the door, as always. "Mommy," Amara said, her eyes sparkling. "I finished my homework all by myself." Cassandra knelt down, pulling her daughter into a warm embrace. "I'm so proud of you, sweetie," she said, kissing Amara on the forehead. "You're growing up so fast." As they sat down to dinner, Amara chattered on about her day, her excitement filling the room. It was moments like these that reminded Cassandra of why she had done everything. The success at work, the recognition, none of it mattered if it wasn't for Amara. But that night, something shifted. Cassandra had received a call earlier in the day from a colleague, an opportunity that would test everything she had worked for. The company was expanding even further, And there was a chance for Cassandra to take on an even larger role, one that involved overseeing the launch of a new international market. It was a massive responsibility, and the stakes were higher than ever. But Cassandra didn't hesitate. She knew she had the strength, the determination, and the vision to make it work. That's when it hit her. The journey wasn't just about proving her worth to others. It was about embracing the possibilities of her own potential. She had built something from nothing, and now she had the power to create something bigger, something that could change not only her life, but the lives of those around her. The next morning, Cassandra walked into her office with a renewed sense of purpose. She had made the decision. She was going to take on the new challenge. The future she had always dreamed of was no longer a distant hope. It was here, and it was hers for the taking. Richard noticed the change in her immediately. "I can see the determination in your eyes," he said with a small smile. "You've always had it, Cassandra. It's why I'm giving you this opportunity. You've earned it." As she sat at her desk that day, looking over the plans for the new market launch, Cassandra felt a rush of excitement. This was the culmination of everything she had worked for. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader. But the real prize, she realized, wasn't the title or the salary. It was the freedom to create her own future, the chance to build something that would last long after she was gone. The months that followed were filled with successes, challenges, and moments of doubt. There were times when Cassandra questioned whether she could handle it all, but each time, she remembered why she had come so far. She had a purpose now, something bigger than herself. The partnership with Richard grew stronger, and Cassandra found herself not only helping the company expand, but also empowering others along the way. She hired people who, like her, had been overlooked, people who had the potential but lacked the opportunities. She created a space where everyone could thrive, regardless of where they came from. And as the company grew, so did Cassandra. She had taken every challenge and turned it into a stepping stone. The confidence she had once lacked now radiated in everything she did. One evening, as she stood by the window of her office, looking out over the city, Cassandra felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had built her future from the ground up, and she was finally the person she had always wanted to be, a woman who had fought for herself, for her daughter, and for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't. The road had been long, but it had been worth every step. She had created a legacy, one that would last long after the deals were done and the contracts signed. It was the kind of legacy she could pass on to Amara, one that would show her daughter that no matter where you start, you can always rise higher. And in that moment, Cassandra knew that her journey wasn't just about success. It was about making a difference. For herself, for Amara, and for everyone who believed that with hard work and determination, anything was possible.